I figured it out. Thank you.
No.
Give me 20 minutes.
Sounds good.
I'll check to see if I have shoes. No, I don't. So just next time.
Thank you for being.
We were just talking about, we're trying to remember what year.
I figured it out. We're rated again, so they're good.
Oh, okay.
Hang out is live. There's no hole in it.
But I did
It's on
my
my computer.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
It was the first time. they
Can't
ever
remember
had
yet.
program. We were there.
How to get the link out.
First chapter and all.
But I'm going
that.
to embed it into the, I made a
There was
website
only
this
small.
afternoon.
Yeah. And I will say that we had several people asking about, because they were in parts of Ohio, and they really wanted to do
Tell me
something during the
something
summer.
about what she.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Talk
she,
about
get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And God, to figure it out.
She's.
Are you ready to begin?
Sure. You know,
Okay.
she's her first lady. But then she lived in Nicaragua for a year, part of peace.
Was she a gymnast? Former gymnast?
Yes, because she always stood with her leg up at her knee.
She's the one who taught us the phrase, practice makes permanent, not perfect.
Yarn hair and she was horsing.
Yes, she was in the inaugural class.
Yes,
Yes. That's why I said you guys told me something about, I remember more about you than I will just your name.
Okay, that's what
Yeah,
I'm
she's
saying.
a former gymnast, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, the details of people. Okay, well, welcome to our book study. We are using the writing instruction for an assessment for English learners. I see most of you have the book, and if you don't have it, hopefully you'll be able to participate in the discussion. Melissa will actually be leading the discussion, the wonderful Melissa. And I've already passed out the contact hours form, and if you want a graduate credit, Georgine is here now for that as well. For the summer part, it's because we know people go on vacation, but with the contact hours, you're just gonna mark the times that you're here. If there are other people who wanna come, the graduate credit is where you actually do need to attend a certain number of hours. So if you know someone who still wants to attend, for contact hours, it's no problem, but for graduate credit, we do need to make sure they get in that number of hours. And I did build it into our system where they could miss one or possibly two, have to go back and look. So anyhow, well, I will lead it over to Melissa to begin.
And before you
Yeah,
do
go
that,
ahead.
I'm sorry,
step right in. I will leave forms. Grades for this are not due until the end of August. So if anybody is interested, I'll leave forms with Jessica, and you can fill them out. And our office is B24, so you can just slide it under the door if anybody's interested after. If you end up attending and you go, oh, I should have done that. Lisa knows that well. And I'll leave those with her. And I'll kind of check the door yet for anybody
Okay.
coming in.
Is it locked in?
I know it won't be locked until like 7, but people seem to not know where to come here.
Thank
So,
you.
and I will check to see if A3 and A4 is available and move you if, and move you if, there's anything else in here today. If it's available, and that way size won't matter.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay,
Thank you for your help.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So I am Melissa Eddington. I teach ESL in Dublin. I have been teaching there for 10 years, but I just finished my 17th year.
I think my director is going to Dublin.
Oh, are you? We actually, yes, we just announced it.
She just
Monday,
emailed
I
us
think.
yesterday. So she's-
Yeah. Dublin just created an ELL coordinator position, which I think was many years overdue.
Because they just met.
I mean, she started Pickerton.
Mhm.
She was the first. EL
For sure.
coordinator there.
So I taught a year of kindergarten in Logan Hocking School District. Woo. I cried every day when I went home that year. Then I taught 6 years in Columbus. That's where I met Michelle many moons ago. I taught a year of kindergarten and then 5 years of ESL and then 10 years of ESL. I've never led a book study. Thank you, computer. So if you were expecting magic, just gotta go, just leave. I don't know if it'll be magical, but I hope no one is bothered. I did figure out how to live stream this, so if people can't be here physically, they can watch it, even though so far we're the only ones watching ourselves. But it took me a minute to figure out how to do it, so next week I'll have it figured out. But anywho, I also, you can see behind me, I whipped up a website today. Google Sites is so much easier now, just want to say. So if you want to jot down the title, or not the title, the URL, sites.google.com/view/Ohio. I couldn't use periods. I could only use hyphens. So OH.
Can you
Yes,
share?
I'm sorry. Yes, I can share it too. Would that be easier? Yes. It's okay. I got it. And I also created a Google folder called the ELL Book Study or Book Top 2017. And every chapter is in there. And this will be chapter 1, which is on the site. When you go up here, you go to chapter 1. My favorite color is green, so everything is going to be green. That's how I roll. But yes, Jessica, do we have everybody's email addresses and stuff? Okay. So I will share that out. Do you want it now or later? Anybody?
I need to give you different.
Did you say now?
A different email. Does anybody else want to use a different email that they?
Thank you.
I think if you could.
I'll have to.
It's on this little piece of paper.
Oh, some long complicated thing.
It's not very complicated.
Okay.
I have to input it. Are you gonna need the computer? Do you want to do this later or?
Oh,
Because I'll have to input each one.
into this? No, that's fine. You can do that. Do you want?
No, I just wasn't for sure if you needed.
Oh, it's okay. Hi.
Apologies for being late.
No
I got myself
apologies
very lost.
necessary.
Oh,
You
she
can go
has
ahead
the
and have a
list.
seat, and when I'm finished, I will come over.
All right. So, does everybody have the book? Great. Has anybody read it before? No, I haven't either. Okay. Does anybody struggle with teaching writing? Oh my goodness. What do I always hear? I don't like to write. And I always go, I didn't ask you if you liked it.
I don't know what to
Right,
What am I writing about?
right. What I find is, so the situation that I was in these last 2 years, it's going to be different for next school year, which I'm really excited about. But so the last 2 years I was moved to a middle school, which was new for me. And oh my gosh, I love it. Anyway, I love middle school. I'm done with the little kids, I think. I'm done tying shoes and buttoning pants, you know? We're on to bigger and better. But my role was to push into their language arts classrooms. Anybody else get to do that? Not ideal. It is tricky because you are having to modify whatever the teacher is doing, which can be a challenge when it's hard to modify it sometimes that low. So to get my kids to write was like pulling teeth because they didn't know what to write about, number one. They felt like they didn't have enough English to write. So I would let them write in Japanese. And then I would pretend like I knew what it said. You know, or we would, you know, they would try to translate as much as they could for me. But this year I had 2 students from Thailand. Now that posed. Luckily we had an ESL teacher's husband who spoke Thai and he translated some things for me, you know, pro bono. But it's a challenge. I think writing, for me personally, probably the hardest thing to teach my kids because they're so reluctant.
There's so much that they can, it has to be.
Right. I know. According to them, sometimes I find. I'm sorry. I meant to go around and ask everybody what their names were. I'm sorry. So I'm Melissa. I don't know for those of you. I'm going to put my name here just in case. And
Jody.
Jody. Is that with an I or a Y?
ID.
Thank you. Even better. And you're in Pickering too.
Amy.
Amy with a Y?
Yep.
And you are?
I'm in Southwestern.
Are you just one building? Are you just one building?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice. I get to go to 3.
Oh. Which building? Holt Crossing?
Is that in elementary? Or
It's an intermediate. That's-
Intermediate.
that's-
Okay, yeah. And Michelle, is that with 1 L? or
2 L's.
2 L's. Thank you, Michelle. And you're in Columbus.
Still at Cranbrook.
Been there forever.
I have Molly.
Molly,
Mhm.
Molly.
I get the travel award. I'm in Cuyahoga Falls.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Streaming.
Cuyahoga Falls. Good for you.
My parents live around here, so
Oh, okay.
it wasn't.
Okay. All right.
I'm Lynette. I work at Sullivan Avenue Community School.
So, okay.
I'm Lisa Hayes. I work at Stiles Elementary School in Southwestern.
I'm Teresa Reeves, and I'm in Westerville City Schools, and I'm transitioning from being an instructional coach to ESL facilitator for all 14 elementary schools.
Oh,
So it's a big transition. Yeah, big transition.
And when you
And I
say
miss tying shoes and
facilitator,
wiping noses when I
Okay.
taught kindergarten.
okay. So as a facilitator, is that like,
Picture an instructional coach for ESL teachers and paras. Well, we have 14 elementary schools, so we have quite a. Some schools have 3 paraprofessionals.
Yeah. yeah,
So it's kind of like an instructional coach and / administrator.
okay.
So anyway, big transition, which is why I'm taking the class.
Oh, nice. Okay. Teresa, I did not write your first name. Is that with an H or without?
It's really La Teresa, so it's
Oh.
TRESA.
My grandma's name was Teresa.
Yeah, do you know Jenny?
I do.
Oh, okay, yeah, Jenny's, she's retired, but I'm so sad. I want her to stay and do the job with me. So I have big shoes to fill. Oh, do you know Jenny too? Okay, from Otterbein? Yes.
I'm Lori Welsh. I am at Norton Middle School in Southwestern.
Is that Lori L.A.? or-
LORI.
Okay.
Been in Pleasant View for a long time, and I'm thinking new Norton School site.
Okay.
I think you're getting at least one of this.
Really?
I can't remember which one though.
Okay, all right, Tim.
Community school, so our kids are mostly either Southwestern District or Columbus District, my address.
Karen,
Karen, that's right. It was like a C or K.
Aren.
Karen.
Karen at Groveport, imagine, right next to Groveport High School.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting a new building.
Groveport High School is,
Yeah.
yes.
I know the principal there. He's really excited.
Yeah, it should be a very nice building, looks like it.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Mary Beth. One word. And I teach in Marion City Schools.
Isn't that where you are, Jessica?
I am.
Yeah. How is Marion?
It has to be wonderful since I'm sitting right here.
Of course.
Marion the city or my job? Two different questions.
Yeah. Good job, of course. Hi.
Wendy.
All right. And where are you?
I teach in Village Academy.
Village Academy. Wonderful. All right. I made a little foop, so now you can't sit anywhere else next week.
I think we're changing.
I know, yeah. That's gonna be even worse. All right. So I don't know about you, but I thought the first 8 or so pages was just kind of repeat of some things that I may have already known, or maybe just needed a quick refresher. And I also pulled up on my own computer, which is recording us, the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition and Language Instructional Educational Programs.
Easy for you to say.
Has anybody, okay, let's go to mine. Does anybody use this site? Yeah. What do you find valuable about it? I don't know anything about it. I hate to even admit
Is that where
that.
they list the strategies? Is that the one?
I don't know, let's see. Have some cute little children on it.
They used to have some videos, but I haven't watched in maybe in a year or so, but they used to have some videos as well as information.
There's a resource library.
I think the toolkit
All right.
under resources.
This one?
I think.
Oh.
I think that's what it is.
It's linked in the chapter 1, so you don't need to write all that down. I already have it for you. Huh. So you've enjoyed it? Karen, was that you saying you've used it?
It was
Oh,
me.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if this is the one. There's one that lists a bunch of strategies for, especially for sheltered programs. So I don't know if this is the one.
Ooh, this is a tough one, huh? ELLs with disabilities. Anybody else struggle with that? We'd be here all day. I have a new student coming next year. He's a incoming 6th grader who I've already gotten a whole 411 on him, and it's gonna be interesting. But the family just thinks he's shy. So we'll see. Maybe I can get him out of his shyness. Anyway. So when I was reading this part, where do ELLs in U.S. schools come from, in this whole section, I talked a lot about Hispanics, Mexicans, Central and South America. And I was curious, Brenda Custodio, that name should ring bells, presented at in Dublin it was a couple weeks ago. I lose track of time in the summer. She talked about her book, Students with Interrupted Formal Education. This is my summer read. I haven't started it yet, but summer is still going on. But she was talking about how Hispanics are still the number one group that are coming in. And the other one was interesting. Shoot, I don't remember anything. Anyway, I don't have one Hispanic student, so it's very interesting. I am more in the affluent part of Dublin, which isn't really my cup of tea, but that's where I am, so I make it work. Most of my students are Japanese or Indian. I learned a couple years ago that Honda owns pockets of houses in Dublin. They just rotate, my family's in and out every 3 to 5 years. So some might call it job security, but I get new kids all the time. But what are some of the major groups that you guys are working with?
I just want to say, I was kind of surprised. I looked at the publication date. It was 2010, but they used numbers from like 2001 and
Yeah.
2002.
Mm-hmm.
It was just,
I noticed that too.
anyways, I have a lot of Muslim students.
Yeah.
From different countries.
Does that seem to be a trend at Cranbrook? Yeah. It's pretty steady there. We have a lot of Muslim students on the other side of the river. Riverside Elementary, Wright Elementary.
Because they start out at Cranbrook and we get them going and
Right.
then they move to
Right.
Dublin because
Right.
they're moving on up.
Right, or they get evicted and then they move to another apartment
Well, there you
complex,
go.
which is in Dublin, and then they go back. But we have a large number of Arabic speakers and non-Arabic speakers, but Muslim students, which obviously brings a different. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say cultural group, but it brings different things to the table, working with families in a little bit different way. In Pickerington, what is a major group that you're working with?
On my side of town, I have mostly Hispanics, but we are getting, this year, from February on, I got 4 Nepalis, and so
That's what she mentioned.
Nepalis are coming in.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they're not, the ones I'm receiving right now are not, they're coming from other school districts.
Okay.
So but it's been major moves, like one from New York State and two from Washington State. And then the other one, I don't know. I was surprised they
That is interesting. She was talking too a lot about the how Trump has decided to lower the number of immigrants that they're letting into the country. I think she spouted off. We used to allow 150,000 a year, and now he dropped it to 50,000. But we've already let X number in, so we only have like 14,000 more to bring in.
Year.
And she mentioned a couple organizations in Columbus that have had to close doors because they're not bringing in as many people, which is so sad. But that's a whole other story about what's going on over there in DC. Anyway, so Hispanics, are there any other larger groups that we're working with? I know Columbus has a lot of Somali students.
Yeah, we have some, mainly Hispanic, Latino, then Somali, but also a pretty large number of Chin, like Chin from Burma or Myanmar.
They're a very specialized ethnic group as well because they're Christian.
Yes.
So it's a Buddhist country, and then Muslims and Christians have been persecuted, and the Christians have come here. We have a very large pocket almost across the street.
Yeah, and then
Oh,
they have their Chin Day at Slime.
Yeah.
Ah.
International is a good time.
Yes.
Good time.
Even,
Huh.
Yeah.
That's
So-
interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I can see that they would probably be a unique group because they're Christian, which we don't really. Another one.
And Ukrainian too. But not as many, that's like our.
Historically, there's a big Ukrainian church, and so historically, that was one of the first groups we had. And now, yeah, so now we're in second and third generation Ukrainians.
Okay.
I'm trying to top most of them.
Yeah. Well, and the book also spoke about how a lot of the ELL students, I think she was saying, are American born, but they're still in the program.
Yes. We have a lot of kids who are born in America, raised elsewhere.
Yes, I have that too.
And it's,
So if they're born in the United States, they move away and then they come back.
I get a lot of, I'm there, I'm coming back, flippy floppy, you know? And according to Brenda, she said an interrupted formal education is like 2+ years, which is a long time. You know, I think of like 3 months, you know, which.
Did she break that down from elementary to secondary, or those mostly secondary students? I'm just curious.
You know what? I don't know if they.
I would say most of them would be middle school and high school just because you have to miss so many school years. But we actually got one in that was like a 5th grader who hadn't been in school for 3 years.
I had a 7th.
So, I mean, so I think there's exceptions to that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
On
You
the
can look at
school
the
that
book.
I'm leaving, we were 5% Somali. Almost every kid in the Somali. We had maybe one child from Nepal, maybe one child from Mandarin,
Okay.
and maybe 2 Hispanic children. But almost across the board. Oh, we had one student who just moved here from Ghana, but he didn't speak the dominant language, just spoke a very small tribal language. So,
Okay.
but other pockets of Westerville might have a heavily Hispanic school, but across the board, we're very heavily Somali. There's whole apartment complexes that
Yeah.
are just like there might be someone there from Eritrea, maybe something like that. But that's it. We just have a very heavy. My girlfriend's a principal in Springfield, Illinois, and one day I was telling her, she goes, "What is Somali?"
Really?
She says, "I like the little place in Mexico. We have Spanish speaking." And I said, "No,
Completely different.
But I forget that, you know, when they're resettled in pockets. You know what I mean?
Right.
She said, "You're kidding me." So she said, "So if I came to Columbus, Ohio, I'd walk around and like see people." I was like, "Yes, you will. Like you would everywhere you look."
Yeah.
She goes, "Wow, I just hear Spanish. I never hear any other languages. Spanish and English, that's it."
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just, I mean, it puts in perspective.
Yeah. That's funny.
I know.
I don't know if Columbus is still the 2nd largest Somali population in the country behind what, Minneapolis? I don't know.
I thought after last year, I heard the statistic was Columbus was still second and still coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thought it was interesting when I started reading the teaching writing for for ELLs. You know, what is it, ELs now or EL? I don't know.
They started using English learners on the federal paperwork.
I know, Ohio's behind us. We've moved up to that, have we?
It's easier to say EL than necessarily.
I know, ELLs, ESO, nobody knows what I say anymore. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm gonna skip to the writing part. Did we want to add anything else from that first section? I don't want to not allow someone to chit chat about
I think one of the things that I was wondering is, just like it talks about native language and trying to help the kids with the native language. And I was just kind of curious if your program's pretty much English only, or how do you utilize those native languages, especially if you have more than one? I was just kind of curious if anybody.
I was jealous, like, that would be wonderful. I do speak Spanish, so that helps. Like, we'll encourage first language use, but I mean, I'm not academically fluent in Spanish. But other than that, it's pretty much English only, and I was like, it's good for them. But, and I don't know if you've heard anything about it. I know we started like a heritage Spanish program in high school, so that's something.
So they could
cool.
lose it from kindergarten through eighth
Yes.
grade, but they'll get it back in ninth.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, that's kind of how, like, ours is more of a subtractive bilingualism program, but it's mainly because we have mostly Spanish speakers in our area. But
Okay.
I just like when I see my middle school and high school students, and sometimes they're embarrassed that their parents speak another language. Sometimes they pretend that they don't even speak Spanish. And so it's just kind of one of those where I would like to do more, but it's just with time and everything.
And what I'm interested in is kids who don't function real well in either of their languages.
We have some of those
I
as
had a
well.
student whose parents estimated his English was better than his Spanish.
Right.
And yet, he has some attention issues as well. But when I did the last links on him, that's what we use when they come into the program. He tested extremely low on that. Conversational English, fine. Reading, okay, this year, apparently not last year. Can't write to save his life. But he doesn't have the academic language in English. I don't think he has any academic language in Spanish to carry over.
In my school, the majority of my students are Chinese, and I speak Chinese.
That's good.
But that helps if they have issues and they need my help. That helps. But my school has the English-only policy for them because if they can speak Chinese in school, they will always use Chinese, and they watch Chinese movies, Chinese shows, talk to peers in Chinese, and they will never use English, and that really holds them back. So, yeah, so that's I found that interesting too, and I in the first 2 years when I was teaching, I felt the first language really can support them learning, and then I felt it's not the truth in my case. I don't know what you guys feel about that. I also heard another Spanish speaking teacher. He said I would avoid speaking Spanish to my Spanish speaking kids. I will always speak in English with them. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Using first language to support them?
I think it depends on the situation. Personally, for me, I think that how, and the book talked about a little bit, how what their first language is and how the culture and the community look upon that first language. If it's something that's valued or not, if it's something that's valued, and the kids, like you said, they wouldn't be embarrassed if their parents spoke it. Something that's valued, I think they would be happy that they kept it. I mean, but if it's not something that's valued, they don't want to necessarily keep it. I don't know, I'm kind of.
I know that in our
talking
area, the
but-
students who have come to me who've had an education in Spanish, because we only have the Spanish speakers, they do much better. I mean, their English is, I mean, they are within proficiency within a couple, 2 to 3. I mean, they're exited out of the program much sooner than the students we have that have been born here or raised here or from who don't have that same educational background. I even had a high school student that came in and he passed the OGTs, except for the reading and writing the very first time, was able to eventually pass those within a year and he started with nothing. So I think, but he had a very good, he was in like one of the best school in his state in Mexico, and you know, he had a high work ethic, and because he had that knowledge, he only needed to learn the English. He didn't need to learn anything else.
Right.
So for me, I find the language very important, and I would like to use more. But in our school situation, our elementaries are only 2 to 3 days a week. And so it makes more of a challenge. We're low incidence. And so one building has 1 student, one building may have 5 or 6. And so we just kind of have to make do. with what we have. But yeah, so there's really no way we can add that language in there during the ESL part. So it's a challenge, but I do see the benefit if we could add it, but adding it is different.
If the first language helps them understand the academics, I think it would be beneficial. If you just doing it to explain things, but if you're trying to explain in English and they have no idea, and if you could just give them a big quick blurb, well, this is what the cloud does, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I get it, and then they could.
Yeah, and I think it's important to differentiate between the social language and the academic language. Because if you have a concept that's really difficult to wrap your mind around, and a child can learn that with words that they already understand and are comfortable with, they can get that idea in their head, and then they've got a peg to hang the new English words on, rather than trying to teach them the new English words and the new concept at the same time. But if they don't have those words in Chinese or Spanish or whatever language we're talking about,
Another thing that, I'm a high school teacher, and writing is very hard for all of them. My 9th graders this year read Romeo and Juliet, they read The Last Lecture and To Kill a Mockingbird. And so my question before we start a book is, do you want one in your language? And then I work really hard to get Spanish is really the most, because that figurative language is so hard. And I have a core group of Spanish speakers who they really do work together on things. But in class, when they're in the ESL class, when they're speaking Spanish, I'm just like, whoa, guys, we need to learn to do this in English. So there are times when they need to be able to speak to each other. One day I had like, okay, stand outside the door and put your right hand out to the pledge. And they couldn't cross the threshold until they promised me they'd speak English. Because they, like you said, they wouldn't speak it if I didn't make them. And so the books in Spanish were very helpful. Their speaking to each other in Spanish is more social. And every once in a while, I'll have a visitor come in who understands Spanish. And I'm like, you know what they're saying? No, please enlighten me.
I think it does make a difference if you understand what they're saying or not. I find that sometimes in Spanish, the conversation is more rich about the books than it is when they have to speak in English only, and I have to provide sentence frames, which are kind of
Makes
boring,
sense, yeah.
and they have to speak within a certain sentence frames. So like listening to them in Spanish, and I'm able to see, okay, you did understand the plot, you did understand what's going on here, and they can even get into some of the deeper critical thinking. But if I were doing it in English only, I'd have to actually take the book down many levels, and
And it's not easy to
and so
to
it's
do
hard.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is difficult to find leveled books, especially at a high school level.
That are not babied,
Right.
like that the kids can see as an actual.
With the little kids, I do a lot of the sound patterns and vocabulary, and so I find it easy to add Spanish words or sounds into like the webs or the vocabulary building so that they're connecting the whole concept, and that works for them rather than actually having the conversation in Spanish or anything. I can just kind of layer it in, and that works for me.
well, just to respond to your question earlier, on page 15, kind of the middle of the page, first language proficiency. So I don't want to read to such excellent readers. Research suggests that students who are proficient in the first language tend to perform significantly better on writing tasks in the second language than students who do not have proficient first language skills. And so whoever this researcher is, whose names I won't try to pronounce here, they will want to say it because I think it's very important to provide that bridge and allow students to use their native language, because when you learn and manipulate languages, it's more than just translating word for word, book, el libro, or whatever the word is in Somali. It's more about learning how language works and the bigger concept behind it, the fact that language expresses emotion and things like that. I kind of think that not allowing somebody to access their first language would be like taking away a tool. It would be taking away these classes and telling me to read what's up there. You know, yeah, my eyesight's getting I'm sad to hear that, you know, and even though a bridge is nice that you're in a building that speaks, you know, where kids speak a lot of Spanish, you'd probably be virtually almost useless, in, you know, in my building. Except a few times we have somebody. But my favorite is when a family came and spoke speaking Portuguese, and we put somebody on there. We misunderstood what language they needed. So that was a whole, you know, debacle. But I guess I feel bad. I almost feel like it's almost a violation of students' civil rights. Well, I do believe what you said. At some point, we got to push some baby birds out the nest, and you know, it's just like when we were in French class and the teacher called on you. You don't want to look like the person who couldn't say whatever correctly. I get that, but I just think it's very important to allow children to access it. There's so much. I had some fifth graders a couple years ago that had they were born in the USA, went to school for kindergarten in Chicago, moved back to Jordan for 3 years. English was gone, non-existent. I found an aide who spoke Jordan, who spoke Arabic, but she spoke it with that particular accent. They couldn't understand other interpreters that were also from Jordan because they were from a small town. So not allowing them to be able to access that, they would have been miserable. You know what I mean? I allowed them to use it as much as possible. I'm sure they talked about me too.
Oh, I know they did. I know
But
they
I
did.
didn't like what I was saying.
I know it.
But you'd
So-
be surprised at how much it's like on topic.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
when I'm eavesdropping, I'm like, oh, you're just explaining this to Kevin. I mean, they're kids, so they're always
I think it goes
doing
back to your
something, but they
purpose,
do it in English too.
like the purpose, the assignment, point of what you're doing. Is it just, you know, if it is a discussion, it doesn't have to be in English, but if your purpose is an English discussion, then it would have to be in English.
It
Yeah.
is a balance because, you know, it's hard because they have to learn academic, and then they also, you know, they do need to learn the English. And if you don't use it, you're not going to learn it. So,
And all of my kids that were born in the States and then from elsewhere, two of them are in France this summer. 2 of them are in Puerto Rico. No, 3 of them are in Puerto Rico. 2 of them are going to Macedonia. It's like, you can't. You're going to forget all the English that you learned. And I know they won't forget it. And I'm glad that they still have their own language and that it still is a primary form of communication. But the summer I love for me, but for the kids, it's.
I always tell people not to test them the first week of school, but they always do. But then by the end, they're like, oh, look how much they grew. And I'm thinking, you know, they just weren't as low as you thought they were.
Yeah.
in our building, we have Spanish PTA, at least we've had for the past few years. And during that time, the parents will come and some will read a children's book in Spanish for the kiddos. And then they talk about relevant topics. In terms of class, during the day, we have a Spanish bilingual assistant, well, and Somali also. And then we have a few staff members that also speak Spanish. Typically, the only students that I find that really consistently speak their home language are the newcomers. And so with our newcomers, what we've done is allow them to clarify things with one another with their peers in Spanish. And at one of the parent-teacher conferences, a parent said that their child wanted them to read stories to them, but they could not read in English. So we started printing out a Spanish version and an English version of the books so that parents could continue to read in their language and then children. I wish we had been more consistent with that. I'm hoping maybe more so next year. And then we're shifting to where our bilingual assistants will have their in classrooms during certain times of the day, which I think will be really nice. And we're trying to open up TESOL. Does it just seem like it's only but open it up a little more?
How did your bilingual aides work previously?
Well, a lot of times they're doing things like obviously greeting parents when they come to the building, or they're interpreting on phone calls if there's behavior issues. And our Somali interpreter in general, for instance, he was just kind of starting to feel like I want to be out there with the kids, you know. So in our building, we have an ESL TBT because half of our population is ESL. So we've got an ESL teacher at every grade level, and then an extra person. I had 59 students on my caseload, and that wasn't even all the first graders last year.
Jeez.
That's one grade? Yeah. And that
Wow.
wasn't even all the first grade.
How big is your school?
We had about 700 students.
Oh,
Jeez.
Yeah, it's huge.
I have 900, 317 of our parents speak a language other than English. So, yeah, we're at 36.2%.
Southwest.
Yes, at my school. And I've been there for 22 years. When I first started, we had 900 students and 9 African Americans. No foreign language. So
At what school were you at?
at Pleasant View. So demographics have very much changed. So,
Wow.
We had 200 out of 750
Wow.
beginning of this year. I mean, it's gone down because of Alpha, but I mean, the kids are still there.
I
Oh.
like how you sent those books home. It was a good idea. And actually, they talk about that on page 5, how they try to teach parents the home language development and actually teach them strategies to help. That's a good, we always talk about, oh, let's have a parent meeting and teach them to do this, but, well, and you know, Ben Rule from Worthington is amazing. Giving parents, Ben Rule, giving parents strategies on how to support students. He's started with preschoolers and they have the library involved and they had a huge grant. They're giving families picture books.
do you know
It's
what school
incredible.
he is? He's the coordinator.
He's the
Oh,
coordinator.
and it's rule, like a ruler.
Yes.
You like how
He
I ask him
He
about
went to
everything.
college.
He was in that second class.
Yeah.
Their preschool program is very,
It's incredible.
Is that right?
it is incredible.
You want him to?
Yeah, and now they're expanding it. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
That's one thing our bilingual assistant for Spanish has been really good at. She's like amazing. She would translate or make homework help tips for like all the subjects, questions to ask the kids when we're reading, and I always encourage them to read in their home language, like or English to their little siblings, because a lot of them in 5th grade are put in caretaker roles.
Mm.
And I really like that idea. I'm gonna have to get some reading agency.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's gotta be reading A to
Yep.
Z. I,
Because the parents were almost embarrassed because they didn't have the language.
Mm.
And the kids were frustrated because their parents wouldn't read to them, you know? So.
And then a lot of times, you know, our demographics are similar. The parents are don't have a lot of education themselves. Like it's a mixture, but a lot sometimes I can tell that, like when I'm messaging with them in Spanish, I mean, it affects the kids too, their literacy at home.
when I was at the thingy a couple weeks ago, an assistant principal at one of the middle schools said that they have brought in their ESL parents to help tutor. I was like, what? Like, that's brilliant. You know, and I said, I'm like, why don't we talk more? You know, because I think, you know, having that opportunity to hear what other schools, districts, whatever are doing is so invaluable, you know. I mean, because I don't know, I never knew who Ben was. Now I'm gonna look him up and I'm gonna ask him some questions, you know. But
He's getting all these questions.
I know. What happened?
They provide a meal for the families. It's just, it's nice.
It's
Is it
nice.
once a month or?
I think he's morphed it a little bit, but I think at one point it was like over a duration of so many months or so many weeks. They had the bilingual instructors that taught parents how to, let's say, for example, take a sneak peek at the pictures and do a picture walk, and then they have time to practice doing that with their kids. You know, so whatever the strategy was that they were working on, and a lot of the students were able to know all of their alphabet when they things that a lot of times they don't know when they're starting out.
And I think that keeping that language is so awesome because we're getting kindergartners who actually are higher in their English than they are in their Spanish. And it's difficult. Because everyone's like, oh, there's a disability there. And it's like, no, it's not a disability. But because they're going to an English-only preschool that's not appreciating their native language and the parents don't have that education because we're in a low economic area. And so I think that yeah, it's definitely.
And building that vocabulary was one of the big pieces. I think that was kind of how they approached the grant, just that lack of books in their library. They gave them diaries for, I mean, there's just all kinds of.
I'd like to clarify one thing. We do not evaluate the students' native language. Actually, we have a fabulous extracurriculum activities. We have international club, which has both American students and international students, and we want them to interact with each other. The purpose of, when we tell them we want them to speak English only in school, is not because we don't want them to lose their root. It's because their parents and themselves have sacrificed so much to come here and learn the language. And if they don't use it, they're not learning. Because in the first 2 years of my teaching experience, they always ask me, because I'm Chinese too, why don't you just speak Chinese to us? They're not learning. And this year, because of the policy, I can see their improvement. If they have issues, they really want to solve some problems and they cannot solve it, or they cannot speak the English, they can always come to me and I can solve it. I always help them. So it's not because we devaluate their culture. I have Korean students too. We always we have Chinese festival, or we celebrate the festivals together too. And we have students bringing food, and the American kids also enjoy it. One problem is some of the Chinese students, they still feel very hesitant to speak English, even if we have such a fabulous club and which provides them opportunities to interact with the American kids. They still want to stick with their Chinese friends, and it's really hard to have them get out of their comfort zone and to speak English and learn the language. And that's why we are forced to have this English only policy. It's we kind of bring it to one extreme so that they can at least get a little bit closer to the goal. So yeah, I just want to clarify.
So you're like the mama bird.
Yeah.
You gotta fly in English. You gotta fly.
What grade do you teach?
Well, I teach every grade. Every grade is from this year. I have a 4th grade student. I have several middle school students and several high school students.
So where do you teach again?
What's that?
Where do you teach?
I teach in Village Academy.
Okay.
It's a private school. So the majority of my students are from China, mainland China, and they're international students instead of I guess most of the students you have are immigrants. They are not. They are here as international students.
So they'll here for a temporary time period, will they be going back to China, their home country?
Yes. Yes.
So they want to learn as much as they can in the time
That makes
That's
sense.
right.
Yeah,
That
makes
makes
sense. When I studied abroad, I had the same problem where I would find my, Canadian or friends from the US and then speaks English. So I understand where it comes from when they're in, because that's a different environment, when they're like sheltering themselves all the time in
That's
their
right.
native language and they need to be. Especially when you have that like effective filter up. You
Especially
don't
with
want
middle
to.
school and high school when they
Yes.
know they're going back. Like,
Yes.
why bother if I know I'm going back?
Right.
Yeah.
I wish
they-
somebody had pushed me.
A lot of them, their parents want them to stay here. They wanted them to go to college here and go to graduate school and maybe work here and finally become U.S. citizen. But a lot of them, they want to go back. They want to heritage because a lot of them are from wealthy families. They have their own business. They want to go back and the life back home is much easier and so colorful. And they will say, I was forced to come here. I don't want to be here. So the situation is a little bit
Mhm.
different.
Yeah. My students from Thailand that I was talking about earlier, mom and dad were divorced, and then mom married an American, a Thai American. And
You
so,
said Italian American?
no, a Thai American,
Thai
excuse
American,
me,
okay, no, I have that here.
a Thai American. And I guess it took him 2 years to get them to move here. So the poor kids did not want to come. They were uprooted to move in with this man that they didn't know in America. And like 6-7 months into the school year, they were getting divorced. And so now they're going back. And it's just like, the Matthew, who was not his real name. They're like Matthew and Cindy, but they had beautiful names, and I would always call them by their Thai names. But anyway, we would sit and talk on Google Translate, as great as it is sometimes, because he would want to tell me things that his stepdad was doing. And I would take notes, and I would take pictures of his phone because he would erase it right away. But I felt like I needed to keep track of what he was telling me, and luckily nobody was getting harmed. But he just wasn't a nice guy. And you feel like you've built this relationship, even though the poor kid understands maybe 2 words that I say, because we have no one that speaks Thai, and it's a struggle. And I'm sad to see them go. And Cindy, she was in 6th grade. Matthew was put into 7th grade, even though he should have been a freshman in high school. We didn't have good transcripts, but you get so used to these kids, and then they have to go, and you're like, okay. But anyway, I could go on and on about that. Okay. Anything else about that? That was a nice conversation. I enjoyed that. I wrote some notes.
Well, I just wanted to add to
Yeah.
I have a lot of Nepali students up in Northeast Ohio,
Okay.
and they tell me all the time that they're not allowed to speak English at home, that their parents want them to keep Nepali, and they teach them how to, different things. A lot of them are educators back in Nepal. So it's hard to, I feel if they're getting Nepali at home, then English should be the school language. So that's because that's the only time they're getting it.
Right.
So, but I feel home involvement is key though for, overall academic success, because if they're getting either language, help from mom and dad is very important.
Mhm.
So, but sometimes English isn't allowed at home, so then but that's just another.
Yeah. Well, you bring up another point though, something that I've had to deal with. I don't know if any of you have had to, I should say. A lot of the parents that do come over are highly educated, maybe more so than some of us. And sometimes other teachers don't understand that. And sometimes you have
Lack
to
of English,
explain that, I remember I had a mom who I think was an OBGYN. But when she came here, her degrees meant nothing. And so, she was doing her best and, she was going back to school so she could get the same credentials here. And sometimes our other teachers don't get that they're working their tails off to be here. And let's not be so upset that kid doesn't turn his homework in every day. But anyway, that's for another day too. I got a lot of days to talk about. Anyway. All right, so teaching writing. I don't even know what time it is. Okay, 6:39. Okay. So the challenges of effective writing instruction. I thought it was interesting, the figure 1.1 on page 11, ironically. All the different ways of the writing. And I know a lot of my Indian students, I believe, never learned how to print. They go right to cursive. And so I remember a third grade teacher was like, you can't write in cursive. I'm like, but that's all they know how to write in, so they're gonna write in cursive. I'm like, what is this? But on the flip side, when our teachers write in cursive, that can be confusing too, because not all of our kids can read that, and getting that message across too sometimes is tricky.
I thought that chart was interesting too, because you just assume if they have the same alphabet, regardless of whether it's English or not, if they have, well, then they're going to be okay. But then you're looking at this like, I would never have thought that would have been so different.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my students, their numbers, I do have to reteach them how to make some numbers so that the teachers don't mark them wrong. But when it comes to letters, I had never thought about some of the mistakes or some of the differences.
It can be tricky if they have a fancy G.
Yes.
I mean, you're like, you need to not make this like this because.
I know.
Well,
They question my handwriting sometimes. Like, I
I
never
don't
say.
mean to tell my age here, but when I was learning cursive, the T didn't always have to have a cross, the short T. It went up and you could just do a.
Really?
I want to write on that board to show you, but you could do that. My mom has one of my old writing books, and you didn't have to, if it was at the end of a word. It's the weirdest thing. And then my A's were always like the A with the hood on it. It wasn't the circle with the stick. This was considered the proper way to do an A, and the circle with the stick was considered less formal. Like you only did that casually. But if you were writing a letter, it had that. So that was print. But anyway, I just was thinking how different it can be. But I tutored some kids from the Czech Republic, and cursive begins at first grade, excuse me. So they barely spend time on print. You have to know how to cursive.
Yeah.
Very early.
I think in France it's in kindergarten. Don't quote me on that, but.
Is there an assumption I wonder if there's an assumption that they already know the print?
I don't know.
I don't know. It's explicitly taught.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they teach it to them?
So that.
So cursive at a very early age.
So maybe it's just in our research, we think the one needs to be done first and this one whereas no, it doesn't actually have to be taught at all.
Yeah.
But we're doing the opposite because schools are just doing print only and no cursive.
I don't know. My mom went to Catholic school. She writes like her mother and all her sisters. They all have the same handwriting. Yeah, it is perfect.
I had a student from Somalia this year. For the very first time, I saw the Arabic influence. He wrote in English. he learned some English in Somalia in the refugee camp, but he wrote it with angles to his letters, like Arabic. I hadn't seen that before. And it took a long time for me to be, I can decipher lots of people's handwriting, but it took a long time for me to figure out what in the world he was writing. So once you got spaces between the words, that helped a lot.
Oh, that
So-
does help. That does help.
That was
Yeah,
lesson one.
that's a big one.
So, but yeah, that was interesting seeing that Arabic influence with the angles on the letters.
And I think it, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I thought it was interesting to think of handwriting as, as a block. I don't really think about it that much in
As a
fifth
what?
grade,
What'd you say?
like a block to writing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think about it that much. And we're always talking about like, well, we type now. But that's also, like, your typing fluency also affects, because that, in the like introduction on page 10, they said that stopping to think about handwriting or spelling, and then, or structure, stops your fluency and it stops your cognitive process. And then I was wondering, well, we need to be teaching typing as well, because they're doing all of these high stakes tests on the computer. And then if they don't know where the keys are, is that the same as how do I make a D?
And I think
And I
it
have a lot of
works. And-
BD problems in fifth grade still. That's why.
That's pretty cool.
Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, I think that does make sense. And when they're typing, if they're typing letter by letter versus word,
Yes.
and then as an adult, when we're typing, we're actually thinking the whole sentence. We already know like what idea we're having, and so that really would make a difference if they're doing word and then have to think, okay, what was I gonna say? And then they do the other
Yeah.
word, and I mean, that does really put that block in.
And these are the same kiddos that started class with, I don't know what to write.
Yes.
So,
So when
you
they're,
know, so after we finally get them to pass that little hump, then they're looking at that keyboard going, where's the T?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
don't know how to make
that
it
was an
all
interesting
fit.
point. I didn't make that connection either.
Well,
This
it,
is something I struggle with as a teacher. I have these standards that are very focused on higher level skills. I have kids that are in third grade and can't spell that. I feel like it would be a good use of my time to sit down with them and teach them to spell that. How do you guys balance these two imperatives?
I've kind of pushed a lot in my classroom lately to do things differently than some other teachers. Like, I co-teach in a language arts classroom, so I'm like, well, we have language standards
mhm.
for the like, all students have language standards, reading foundational standards, that help you support that. So they talk about like spelling and like, in fifth grade, they're supposed to be able to explain the use of conjunctions and the functions. And I don't know what a noun is, when that's a third grade standard, is identify a noun. So that's one way, like, and then I've worked a little bit with working it into word study or like a discussion after a read aloud, but I'm still trying to figure out how to balance it. I feel like there's never enough time and there's always too much stuff.
Where you expose them to the higher level standard, so at least they're aware of it, as much as they can be aware of it. You've got, for me, I always feel like you have to start where they are.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's what I do. And then you always have the ESL standards to look at now. And since they've changed them, I really like them. I think they're very, very developmental. And if you say, well, why aren't they doing the standard? You can say, oh, well, they are doing the standard, but they're doing it at this appropriate level for a beginning ELL student. So it's appropriate that they're just finding one detail to support this main idea instead of the whole.
You're not applying it.
Right. So I think the EL standards are a good place. So then if anybody comes and says, your principal, whomever, why aren't you doing this? Well, this is a standard appropriate for this student.
Even in the interactive learning.
I'm not sure. Or maybe you compose writing together.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, you could emphasize some of the words.
If they don't have those basic things, they can't go on to them.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the word that, because just the fact that it's a sight word. So I worked with a woman who taught kindergarten for 26 years, and she said that when they'd done an analysis of why these kids aren't getting past the level A and B books, they looked at the difference. The difference was sight words. And so for her, and I'm a middle school trained person, so she brought me that knowledge. And so that was very helpful for me. So sight words then became a cornerstone for what I was doing, especially with the newcomers. Those are non-negotiables in my universe. So because of that, because of what she said. So no, I think that's an interesting point too. But you're right, there's never enough time.
I always think you can have your cake and eat it too. See if this comes out right. Because it was your analogy about the finding three details. Okay. So help me go down this rabbit hole. Because we never want to water down the curriculum, right? Okay, so we never want to deprive students of the most rigorous education we can give them. But we know if they have a huge hole, like missing a sight word or not knowing a digraph sound or etc., go on. So taking her analogy, you find three details that support the main idea in the story. But you know that student can barely write cat, dog, and bat, okay? What if, to make sure they had the deepest concept, they could draw it or circle it or highlight it? I don't know what grade you teach, okay? Or pick it out of the picture. So they picked the three main events, and the little pigs were the brick house, the straw house, and what was the other house? Sticks.
Sticks.
So sorry, and I promise I'll be super fast. So now I know that my student actually did fulfill that curriculum. My student actually did do everything I was asking every other student to do in that room. Find the three details to support, I don't know, whatever the question was, okay? Now it's time to write. So now I know that you can't write the first pig made a house of sticks, the first pig. So now I'm plugging in that hole, but I didn't water down anything. So I'm still giving them the full curriculum while still plugging in the holes. So I don't know if you find yourself having to do that a lot with newcomers, because as an ESL teacher, I always wanted to keep in the forefront. Was this a language barrier? Or was this really a comprehension, content barrier? And I always, I was holding myself so accountable for that. So how can I really make sure I was assessing what they know and not getting sidetracked by the fact that he has this hole in sight words or digraph sounds or whatever the case might be? Because there was something in our chapter that was talking about certain sounds that Asian students sometimes get. There was something in there. Do you remember that little section? The B sound or whatever.
The L and the B.
The L and R, I was gonna say.
Right. 'Cause we had a teacher one time that refused to pass a kid on an F&P reading assessment. He's Vietnamese because he never ever would put the plural, the S on.
Oh.
And I said to her, when's the last time you got takeout? And I'm not stereotyping. When's the last time you got takeout? So she said, oh, just the other day. When you ask for 5 soy sauce packets, what was usually response? She goes, oh, I love Ming Chow that works there. She always says 5 soy sauce. And she leaves off the S. He's doing the same thing. He has this content. Move on. Kids, don't hold him back. We can keep plugging that in with the plurals or whatever the case may be, but move on.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting tripped up by something that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was this kid could read that passage. He just doesn't like to put the S on plurals. It's going to be 5 car, 6 car, 10 car. We got the point that the movie was about a car or a Smithy car. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to belabor that. But I always think about that, like, I want to make sure I'm really assessing my needs assessed by, but not neglect. Plug it in the holes. So when I come back next week, you guys are going to teach me how to do that.
Yeah, when we do the DRAs, we're supposed to mark off a every time they don't put an S on the word.
Or any type of
Have
ending.
one. I
don't do
that. Have it with them. Yeah. Do one with how many errors? Excuse me. How many errors is it? If it's.
I think sometimes with those testings, it's not just the ending, like sometimes it's vocabulary.
Mm.
If they don't know a certain vocabulary word, they may score lower, but they're actually at that level or even above, but because they didn't know elephant or they didn't know, a certain vocabulary, they totally missed the benchmark exam or whatever they're doing.
I think it's hard too with just non-standard dialects in general. Like I grew up in very rural areas, and even the way my mother speaks is and it's hard for me. Like I know you're in this community, and that all of the native English speakers you talk to in the real world say it that way. And so I'm going to say, no, we say it this way, but no, actually everyone in your apartment complex or whatever says it this other way. And that's hard for me, like dropping S's or using past tense. It's hard, and I know exactly where they're picking that pattern up. It's not because they're not learning. They are learning. They're just learning non-standard, and I think that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Which is where that whole piece that I love about teaching them grammar and structure. Yes. Being explicit with it.
Grammar.
I just want to say one more thing about handwriting.
Yeah.
Just because I always used to be more about, well, did they get the idea? I wasn't focused so much on him. Oh, look, they've got, they put in this great idea and blah, blah, blah. But now I'm getting to be more of a stickler about the handwriting, because if I haven't made them write neatly or learn how to form the letter correctly, and they just start to write the letter, you're like, yeah, you're getting this, but even if it's not exactly right, as they get older, now that I have the older elementary students, like they have really messy handwriting, and even if they have the right thing, you can't read it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kind of in the book says about the fluency, it's important when they're young to get that down, I think.
It's a barrier against people as they're perceiving it too. Like when someone's reading their writing, it can be great, but it's the same thing as an accent. You're gonna perceive it as
this kid doesn't
less
know
than or whatever, just because it looks messy. That's hard too.
You can't decode it because you have to stand on your head to read it. Then they haven't done the job of communicating their ideas. It's the same. I always tell the kids it's the same as mumbling.
Yeah.
Like you can talk to me like this, I don't understand you. Yeah. Same thing if you scribble, like I can't understand it.
I really like it when people say, well, I know what I was trying to say. And I always say, well, the point of communication is, so let's try it again.
Yes.
I need to understand.
Have you ever had them try to read it back and they can't read the
Yeah. Me too.
And that was 30 seconds ago, so what do you want me to do?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
I find that, well, and I don't want to deviate from your outline.
Oh, goodness heavens. I just wrote things that were in the chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I love this part. This is like the most juicy favorite part. Make a fluency. But I find sometimes just going back to kids that don't know what to write, they don't know what they want to say, that even if we have them form a sentence, they almost need to say it over and over and over and over again just to remember what they wanted to say. And it's the same way even in guided reading, just remembering patterns and structures.
I think the oral piece indicates that reading piece. So because they're both output, so I think that oral piece coming first, and the idea that they are able to say it over and over again, I think that is going to reflect positive in their writing. So
it's just amazing how many times I have the kid, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what to write. And then I elicit their verbal response, and out comes something pretty beautiful.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, write that down. And it's just like, they had no idea how to connect that thought that came out of their mouth to writing. So we worked with like recording them a few times, but then it's fighting with the Chromebook, so.
Mhm.
But it's been really helpful. And then with the fluency, like the patterns, even with the spelling, like I did a lot more words their way this year. And it was amazing to see how much better they were at decoding and then spelling, like trying to like at least apply sound patterns, because that's something that I kind of neglected. And I mean, it was only my third year, so.
You saw that transfer though.
Yes. And
So
like when I do their benchmark and they'd come to a word that, was a silent E on the end, they'd stop and they'd know it. When before they were just guessing. It was really helpful.
When you say you did words their way, did you do the games and things like that?
I didn't do all the games. I can send you some videos and stuff. I forgot you left us. But we started out, we introduced, we'd introduce, like I did the inventory and you give them like a spelling test and it tells you what features they need. And then I started them on the pattern in their group. So like I'd run a group and my co-teacher would run a group. And we'd start doing word observations, like looking at vowels, consonants, and then patterns, and then doing a sort together and talking about the pattern. And then we eventually expanded it to finding like errors in a paragraph and fixing them, and then writing sentences. Like it was really helpful. So I can pull that stuff up and share it.
My struggle is doing that in isolation.
Yes.
I feel like it should always come with some kind of a text base,
Mhm.
but then it's impossible because then you get, like you said, you've identified groups, so already you've identified your kiddos don't need the same thing.
Yes.
So you're not doing whole group instruction, which precludes use of the text because you can only read so many texts. And
But we also had them do, I forgot about this, word hunts. So they'd be doing independent reading, whatever they wanted, and they would find, so if their pattern was long A, and they had AI and A consonant E, or A, whatever it was, they like get their little whiteboard and put their T-chart and write the words down. And then they were actually reading. Sometimes.
Do you use the English Learner one, or do you
Yes.
just use? Because I found that in our district, I do it in isolation as well. We do have a book. It does come with a book of poems that you could use as your text.
Words their way was?
Words Their Way with English language learners. There is an activity book which has like the picture cards and the different things that go with that. And then there's a poem book as well that you could utilize. And then there also are like guided reading kind of books. We've never used those, but they're in my
With
office
Words
sitting
Their
on the
Way?
shelf. What's that?
With Words Their Way?
That are by them?
That's Pearson, yeah.
Oh.
And so the Words Their Way books go with the actual Words Their Way, but the English learner books also go with the Words Their Way. The curriculum is just made for English learners. But yeah, but there's A, B, and C. I think those are the ones we got. But yeah, they're actual textbooks that kind of are little guided reading type books that go with it. No, I don't think
Are
anybody
they
uses them. this year.
printable, or are they-
No, those they're just like little books. Yes.
But in the Words Their Way for EL books, there is, like in each section, there are lists of trade books that you can use for those patterns. I haven't always looked at them, but I love that book.
Do you know how the Words Their Way for EL learners differs from this?
They have
typical Words Their Way?
cognate sorts, and I don't know if the like sequencing is different. But they like bring in cognates and they talk about like struggles that ELs would have at certain spots. So
They use a lot more pictures too.
yes.
There's a lot more pictures, a lot more concrete vocabulary that's being utilized in some of them versus some of the more
Concrete.
abstract.
You know,
Like that you can make pictures that you can easily
identify
identify.
the words in their search are more
especially for the lower level ones. I actually have I can bring the books next week, the activity books that kind of go through.
I won't
I'd love to
Can
see
you bring it
those.
the third week?
I can bring them both.
Sorry.
Yeah, how about the fourth?
But yeah, I can bring part of the curriculum. Like I said, like they have, yeah, I did notice that, so we've had the program, we've been using it for about 5 or 6 years now. However, it's really difficult to have, like we have the books, we have the workbook, and so most of the teachers just pretty much take the workbook and just kind of go through it. But the teacher resource guide actually has a lot of information. And so we actually ended up this year, hopefully for next year, people actually use the resource guide because there's actually other games that go along with it, as well as how to utilize the poetry, what the assessment for that section should be, or what it should look like. And so there's a lot of different ones. So yeah, I can definitely bring that in. But I thought it was very beneficial. When we started using it, it really helped. We saw a difference in our students' writing and their reading.
I used like our school had the password for the regular one, so I don't know if I was getting different sorts when I was printing them off. But I worked with our literacy coach a little bit, and like the literacy coaches saw a correlation between being in like the appropriate spelling stage and passing the 3rd grade reading guarantee. So there's some data to support that. We need it.
Even if it's really low.
But
I
the
really value it.
the inventory though, I think is very helpful because
Yeah.
sometimes you think kids are further than they actually are, and sometimes you think they're behind where they actually are, and sometimes you can see the gaps. Well, wait a minute, you can do these higher ones, but you can't do some of the
Yeah,
lower ones.
it's amazing to see. Like I had kids who are in 5th grade, and like I ended up getting a child on a speech IEP because he couldn't distinguish like any short vowel sounds at all, and like was not making progress. So like
I was an ELL student.
he exited.
Oh. I used that data for the same reason. And it was he couldn't identify beginning consonants.
Wow.
Yeah. So long-term EL. He's been here 9 years. So
Wow.
yeah. So it's tough.
So I'm going to ask a question kind of related to that, but it's not in this chapter. So in Dublin, so if a student were to have red flags, if somebody suspects a disability or whatnot, we have to go through the RTI process, which can be very lengthy. And we have one assessment that we can use to decipher kind of if it's an English or if it's a first language difficulty. It's the BVAT. Is anybody familiar with that?
I've seen the book and
All right. It's called I think it stands for the Bilingual Verbal Aptitude Test.
Is it used for a certain language, or is it used just for anyone who's bilingual?
So good question. So it only comes in certain languages, right? So if it's anything other than those languages, you can't use it, right? So it's real helpful. So with Spanish speakers, it seems to be okay. Arabic speakers, the Arabic is a formal Arabic and they don't understand it. So what it is, I should explain it, I'm sorry. So what it is it's a ring full of pictures. And so you show them the pictures in English and they have to identify it. What is this? Fish. And you go through until they miss so many and then you move to the next section. And then there's analogies, which I think are difficult. But anyway, and then antonyms and synonyms. So there's these 4 different sections you go through and they're all pictures and you kind of walk them through it. So they go through the English part first and then whatever they get incorrect in English, you give them in their native language.
So it's just object naming?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have to understand opposites and
Yeah.
but it's very, it's not real hefty. And then with the ones that they get correct in their first language, anyway, you put all this stuff in the computer and it spits oh, their English ability is at a grade 6, second month or whatever, and their Arabic ability is second grade, 4th month or whatever. And then it spits out like a year equivalent. But what I found, the Arabic version is formal. So the words that are in the book and what the interpreter has to read is not Arabic that they're used to hearing. Oops. So that kind of defeats the purpose. And for us, that's like one of the only measures we have to decipher whether or not that child has a learning disability or not. Like that's how we can rule out that it's not language. If those equivalencies come back even.
When do you start? I mean, the 3-year rule, I thought, do you guys have to, is that a universal?
I don't think that's.
There is no rule, because if
I
you
don't
go
think
by a
it is
rule,
a
it's
rule.
not a civil rights violation. But I think rule of thumb is that you want them to have enough English exposure. But usually by 3 years, you have 3 years of the OELPA that you can kind of see, are they making progress or not. But there's actually no rule. So if day 1 they come in and in Spanish they can't even pronounce anything, then you can go ahead and start day 1.
Mm-hmm.
But that based on their native language versus being based on English.
Mm-hmm. But I have so many kids who, you could see, with working with them for a week or so, that something's not connecting, and but there's no way for us to decipher what it is. And so, we may have these kids in this RTI process forever because we don't have a way to rule it out unless they pass OELPA. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
And I think sometimes you don't know if it's like, you think it is. I've had a
Right.
student, definitely learning disability, and then they keep plugging along, and then all of a sudden in 3rd grade, bam, it clicks for them. And you're like, oh, okay, you just needed some time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the RTI process, they're getting that extra help that they need, so it's not a negative thing if
Right.
they're
Oh,
in
yeah.
there in addition to it.
Mm-hmm.
In our district, it's even more difficult because we're working with not just the English learners, but almost all of them come from low economic areas as well. And our students in general, the general population, which is their role models, also come from low economic situations. And so it makes it a little bit even more of a challenge.
Yeah.
But I do think that like the native language, if we can get that native language testing within the first couple of years, but then after that, like if all of a sudden someone in 5th grade, the kid's been here from kindergarten, I can't test them in Spanish anymore. It
Right,
doesn't, because
right.
they haven't heard it. They don't have the content vocabulary for 5th grade.
Right.
And so I do find that it's much easier within those first couple years. But like I said earlier, we have a lot of trouble with students who are coming in who aren't at level in either language, but it's just because of exposure, not because of disability. And the teachers are getting better, but I think trying to provide those RTI interventions that are good. Like sometimes they'll be like, well, they did this 3rd grade paper, but I'm like, they're not at 3rd grade level.
Right.
You can show me as many 3rd grade papers as you want, but that's not good enough data for me. You have to be able to show it. But if they can show, wait a minute, I've been teaching this and they're still not getting it.
Yeah.
How are you teaching it? Let's try a different way. And then after you try that, you can kind of start to, but it is a process.
Yeah.
And it's a lengthy progress.
That's it. We have the 3-year rule before we even start an RTI on a kiddo. And then there's only one kid I know of that beat that 3-year rule, and it's only because in his ESL teacher at the time, he was teaching the letter M, and the kid was not getting it, and he'd get it in that day, and then the next day he'd come back, and it was gone. And so, and the sounds and the basic things, and so finally he was like this, and so then they did the special ed assessments as best they could, and he's the only one I know of that was even looked at before 3 years.
And there is a nonverbal assessment, but the problem is when you're working with kids like from other countries, is the type of questions that are asked may not be the types of questions people ask in other countries.
Right.
And if they're coming from low economic or low education, they're definitely not being asked those questions. So even if it's a nonverbal, or even if it is in their language, the type of language being used, like you were mentioning, it just doesn't help.
And I find too, when we, by law, provide them with a dictionary for the third
So
grade
helpful.
and so many other grade level air tests. And then I give them the book and they're like, well, Mrs. Ellington, I can't read that. I know. Keep it on your desk. On your-
Well, the ones, some of them like the Arabic is formal for you.
Yes.
That, and the other, the dictionaries, it's a formal
Yes.
Arabic, and the Chinese students I have, they're like,
Yes.
I don't know this.
My
this is so
Japanese students.
formal."
Or how to
Could
look
it-
it up if they've never been taught how to look something up in the dictionary.
We're
Right.
giving a Somali dictionary.
Right. 'Cause- Yeah.
One of my
I know.
Somali students, she did use the dictionary, but she was like, none of the words are there.
Yeah.
She goes, the ones that I know are there, but the ones I don't know are not in there.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, the Japanese characters were too advanced. But here you go. Okay.
I think with that, a lot of it goes to the interventions also, and are they done with modality?
Mm.
You know, it is so hard being a classroom teacher with 26 kids. I had a teacher this year. She had 26 students, 20 of them were EL, and 4 out of the 20 were newcomers. So just, they were all little first graders.
Oh, gee, even worse.
So it's just, it is very challenging
Yep.
if you don't have extra people or schedule doesn't, having those interventions done with quality and the right interventions and progress management.
Yeah.
And are they research based? So there's a lot.
I think that's why it's important that someone from the EL department is on that RTI meeting, in those RTI meetings, so they can say, okay, what are you trying? Okay, or come up with the ideas to, let's try this, because you know it is something that is at their proficiency level, not just at their grade level.
Mhm.
But as the EL teacher, can you help with the intervention?
Well,
Do you, I mean,
I think it'll be different next year because I'm gonna be on the committee. And so I'll be able to know more, like some of the things, I didn't even know that these were interventions that were in place. So it was just kind of a lack of communication.
What committee are you talking about?
Out to,
Oh, at your school. Mhm.
even when your face was something, sometimes it's.
Our caseloads are small, but it's still really hard, because if they want to have it at a certain time of day,
Yeah.
and we have people at the middle school and the high school start earlier, but it's when the elementary want to do it before school, we're already teaching, so we couldn't, because we work in multiple buildings, so it's hard to get around, or some of them want to do it after school, and, if you're teaching another building until, that time, so it makes it more challenging, and for some reason, they're okay if we're not there, and I don't want them to be.
Yeah.
I want it to be required that if they're going to be talking about a student that's identified as an English learner, that someone has to be there. It's no choice. But yeah, it's hard to do.
Yeah. That'd be nice to mandate that. I'm going to start that petition. Let's see. So Lisa, you're a grammar fan?
I'm just a fan of the fact that they broke down all of the aspects that have been slowing down the writing process.
Mhm.
I think the way that they explained it is also easy to go to a middle school writing teacher
Yeah.
and explain to them why they're struggling. I think it breaks it down to be able to help out classroom teachers.
I almost danced when I read on the bottom of page 13 and top of 14 that the fact that merely exposing EL students to a new language does not seem sufficient to help them. Like, I've had this conversation many times where, like, they're just expected to model it or embed it, like, and then boom, they'll get it. And while that might work for some students, it doesn't always. So to have somebody else, like, have my back here.
Yeah.
It's good.
And then they were talking about the interlanguage, which is right below that in 14, or on 14, the first full paragraph. The language usage that forms the bridge between first language and fluent second language. Or, and the whole process that our kids go through when they're hearing it in English and then they're trying to decipher what it means and then spit it back out, and that whole process that they have to go through. And we, expect them to be like this. Not we, but vacuum.
I don't know if there's a buzzing going on. I think is that just getting loud?
Oh no, I
It sounds
think
like
I think that's
the speakers or
that.
something.
Yeah, it's really obnoxious too.
I wonder if that's because I turned them on.
I also really liked the organization section,
Mhm.
how it pointed out that there are different organizations depending on culture.
Yeah,
Like,
I never thought about that.
When I did a year in Mexico and I had a hard time with my writing. I have no idea what to do, so I can definitely see how that comes back in when I see some of the kids' sentences or their paragraphs. I'm like, well, it's not how I would do it, but of course they're coming in with a different frame, so it's a good reminder for me.
And sometimes not just the frame, because I'm from China, and I noticed that some of my students, when they're writing, they're not just not following the pattern, but also when they're generating their thoughts, they would repeat some ideas over and over again instead of providing supporting details,
Mhm.
because I think it's their lack of the instruction of you need to do that to make your arguments convincing or convincing, or so that I felt that's something that they probably had not been taught, or they're not mature enough to explain things in that way. So I'm trying to teach my students, especially high school students, to write in that way.
Mhm. I find that a lot too. But sometimes I'm guilty of that too. When I'm writing a paper, I might repeat something a couple times just to see if they notice. But no, it's rampant in the middle school.
I think a lot of it is I don't know what else to do, so I'll just repeat myself.
Yeah.
It's a good, that's their only strategy they have.
Uh-huh.
To get that many words on the page. There's so many
Yes.
lines. Just
Right. We need to write a 5-paragraph essay. Each paragraph has to have at least 3 sentences. And I'm like,
Oh, mine.
I always scribble that out.
Internalize
Just
some
write.
crazy rules. I don't know what they hear. Sentence unless it has 7 words.
7 to 10 words. Yeah. I had
Have you
one
heard
teacher
that
one
too?
year. Well,
Really?
one of the teachers they were telling the kids that they had to have 7 to 10 words per sentence, and this was an elementary kid, not middle school or high school, elementary. And so I'm like, let's get our ideas down. Don't worry about that. We'll worry about that later. Because we always worry about spelling and grammar, and I was like, we'll worry about that later. Let's just get the ideas down. It's a rough draft, and then we can move on from there. But yeah, that's what they 7 to 10.
But
Okay,
I
what
do
about
have
the-
that requirement for not when they're writing, but when they're using the vocabulary words to make a sentence.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes we're just to say, "Oh, Susan is beautiful," and if we learn "beautiful" this word, they would just make sentence like that. That's not acceptable.
No
You have
context.
to, no context. You have to write like long enough sentence to show your understanding and show how you know how to use it.
That makes sense.
I get 5th graders coming with the idea that they'd have a whole paper with no periods, just everything
I
connected
love
and.
Then.
And I know somebody has taught it to them, like,
I got all those students.
you know,
Yeah.
middle school.
But I think at least they can have the ideas down. I find it's
Yes.
easier to do many lessons on the grammar and many lessons on the spelling than it is to do many lessons on getting ideas. Because if they don't have the ideas to write, so there's like some positives and some negatives. I think like the 5-paragraph essay or the 7 to 10, I think sometimes the structure for some kids, it helps. But I think that for a lot of the ones, it's just like, get it down and then we'll work on it. But I do think like for some of the ones who are well educated, that it actually does help. Okay, you need to have, this is what they're looking for. And so for those students I have seen, especially at the high school level, the ones I've come in that have been educated, the more they know about the structure, what's the teacher expecting from me, that it actually does help them. The the ones that come without the education or have a poor quality of education, then it generally is, let's get your ideas down. I'll correct it, and then usually from there I pick out 1 or 2 things to do a mini lesson on, because if you pick out everything,
Right.
you'll be there forever. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
I had an advanced class this year, and they were this close to testing out. And I struggled with that structure because I felt like with those kids, because they had some great ideas, and I felt like sometimes it was trying to take those ideas and bottle them and put them into.
And I think that's why it's not good. Yeah.
It felt stifling in some ways, and I really struggled with that. I found myself modeling a lot of different things that weren't with that structure, and then they found it. They were like, well, you didn't have, and I did that on purpose. Thank you for finding that. It was the idea there. And and so we worked a lot with that, but then on the flip side, with my lower level, without that structure, game over. No words would be on the paper. So I don't know, it's hard. It makes writing even harder for these kids. So.
I think you have to know who needs more of the structure, who needs less. And I think that's why, like, when you individualize, but when you have a class of 20 or 30, it's so hard to pinpoint exactly which method.
For my middle school kids, usually I want them to write and generate their ideas down first, and I don't even worry about the structure. For high school students, I don't require them to follow that.
Let's see. Oh, I thought it was funny on 18. Well, I didn't think it was funny, but let's see, the middle of the page, it says, having students write nonfiction as a model for teaching them to write, minimizing free writing until they have mastered elements of the writing process. And then I kind of stopped there because free writing.
Write whatever you want.
Yeah, and
I don't want to write anything.
Yeah, they usually don't. They usually pull out their Japanese book and read. Right, I think so many of the things that mainstream kids and mainstream teachers will tell their students to do are just so not feasible. There's a better word for it, but like free writing or I mean, my kids like to read, and choice is the way to go because most of them will read, or at least my Japanese students will read a Japanese book. And I never force them to read an English book unless it's part of the assignment that they needed to do. But I don't know where I'm going with this. But anyway, free writing I find is hard to do. Like, what's free writing? I think they need structure and lots of scaffolding, which is thrown in here at the end of that page.
And if you, because I was always big on free writing, need to write, to write, helps you improve writing, blah, blah, blah. But then when I thought about this, that nonfiction writing is actually easier. You research that and then say, oh, turtle's green, it has a shell, and whatever you want to say. Like, oh, that makes good sense, just to model it and get that fluency down.
Yeah.
And then transfer that to me. Never thought about that.
When you introduce like narrative and argumentative, you know, then you're into like figurative language and all of these things that are confusing. I had a teacher this last year that would require, you know, you have to have 4 figurative languages things and this and that. And then they had to go through and they had to highlight everything that they, with different colors and I'm a fan of different highlighted colors all over paper. That's just me. I felt like kids, especially in 8th grade, would just tear things apart. But how do you know what to tear apart if you're not really sure what you wrote? And if it is, you know, one of those requirements or whatever. Anyway.
I think requiring figurative language is weird.
the high school level, they do it, and it's really difficult, especially when I'm giving students the book in their native language. So some of our kids will read in their native language when they're reading the book in the English, and the teacher will be like, on page whatever, there's the example of figurative language, and they go, can you find that for me for them? And so I'm like, but just because it's in figurative language in English, when they translate it, they don't translate all metaphors. Usually the similes are personification most of the time is, but not always. But metaphors aren't, I mean, very rarely will you see them translate those. And it's
Idioms, I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a vocabulary thing you're teaching, and okay, so work it in, use it as your vocab exercise. How do you, if you don't know it, you can't. That's weird to me.
Even simple one, hard as a rock.
Yeah, well, in 6th grade, they all.
and they translate it as difficult in other language. Like they'll just and they won't even put hard as a rock. Like when you're using a translated book, they may just say it was difficult.
Mhm.
It does.
My 6th graders had to pull out a piece of paper, and they were all idioms, and they had to explain on a piece of cake what it meant.
I did.
That's hard.
Yeah, I did have some of mine do the idioms from their own languages. Some of the Spanish ones actually translate pretty good, but they actually have the same one in Spanish. But even the ones that they didn't, like in Somali, they had some, and it was interesting. So like they still got that aspect, but it's just in their native language, and so that helps. But I think in general, when teachers say put things in your own words, and then I have to tell them what words do you think they have?
Yeah.
If you haven't taught them, this is especially with vocabulary, unless you want it in their native language. There are no other words. This is all they know. So,
Yeah. Mhm.
My son took AP English, and every paper he had to read. It was required the different figurative language. I think the idea is to teach that this is author's craft, and that this is how authors don't just put the words together. They always use these figurative pieces in their writing. That's what they do, but it makes it very difficult.
yeah, for them to understand alliteration, it's just because it's in the English version. Guess what? It's not going to be in the Spanish version.
Right.
It's like reading Shakespeare in Spanish. The meter is not
Oh,
the same, nor does it rhyme.
that's good.
Well, I think that kind of the author's craft is something that's organic. Once you learn the tools, you have to use them when you, the author, deem it appropriate. Like having to regurgitate a certain number of those
Right. So
crafts is.
so write 3 paragraphs, but make sure you have 4 of these. I agree. That's very difficult.
You no longer have any craft as the student author. You
Right.
don't have
Right.
your own voice.
Well, I know my own craft, and I don't use metaphors, so I do not like them. So it is interesting.
And I usually I'll just modify the rubric, usually for the high school students if they're in the regular classroom. Sometimes we have an ESL class depending on their level, and then we also have it where they go into their regular class depending on what proficiency level they're at. So if they're in the classroom, because I have students who are level 1, but they still go to the regular English class because their Spanish is at level. And so that means they can use the Spanish literacy resources, where I have other kids who can't read in their native language, so they just come to the ESL class or their English class. But anyhow, but I find that sometimes I'll just take the rubric and I'll say, okay, for them, let's focus on, we may even focus on something different. We may focus on grammar, make sure their verb is right. Make sure like something, whatever we're working on. And so sometimes I'll just change the rubric.
I do that too. Or when they're taking a quiz and they've put, in a box of 10 words, but they only need to use 5 of them.
Cross them out.
I just modified it a little bit.
Sometimes I'll highlight, these are people in this color. These are these are places, and especially for the history ones, because they can't tell the difference between the people and the places. So, and then I'll highlight the numbers. These go with people. These go with places.
Mm-hmm.
The names are hard. They'll be like, what's a Robert? I don't know names.
Yeah.
It is 7:30.
Okay.
I'd like to say that as I was reading this,